now that we have corrected our sentiments about the Arabic language and have realized how important Arabic is to us as a Muslim community, and we understand that having that belief about the Arabic language, correcting our sentiments about it, knowing that it's the most superior language and how valuable it is to us as Muslims and as a community, and we've understood that that is the first step towards Fiqhul Lughah, I actually want to take us all into the mind. I want to place ourselves into the mind of an expert jurist, an expert faqih, a mujtahid. I want us to take a journey through an alim, a faqih, a mujtahid's mind as he reasons through an issue. Now, before we begin into that, inshallah, I want to just clarify, by ulama, we mean fuqaha and mujtahidun. Okay, fuqaha, who are experts in fiqh and aqidah and so on and so forth. They are expert in deriving rulings and so on and so forth, and they are experts in making ijtihad. They can independently reason. So we are not talking about qualified graduates of some university or madrasa who can quote a fatwa from a different sheikh or a different scholar or a faqih. So we're not talking about those class or that class of scholars. We are talking about ulama who are fuqaha and mujtahidun, who have the ability to independently reason through the nusus and get to a conclusion to solve issues at hand, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So that is the term, that is what I mean by the term ulama over here. Right, so this journey, inshallah, is going to give us an overview, a bird's eye view of what Fiqhul Lughah is and its connection with ijtihad. Right, how the two subjects sort of play together. So this is a Fiqhul Lughah and ijtihad at a glance, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll be looking at this whole journey, inshallah ta'ala, through this verse. This verse is in Surah Tawbah, and inshallah ta'ala, I will take you through this verse in a brief manner, not in a detailed manner, inshallah, just to show you the kind of thought processes that are happening in a jurist's mind, in a mujtahid's mind, as he reasons through the nusus, the texts of the tradition, of our tradition. So normally, before we begin this journey, I want to just clarify that normally we hear that to understand the Quran or to interpret the Quran, you make sure that you understand the Quran with the Quran first, so that everything is in harmony, and then you understand the Quran with a hadith, and then you understand the Quran with the statements of the Salaf, the Sahaba and Tabi'een, and so on and so forth. And lastly, you go towards the Arabic language for its tafsir and its clarity and understanding. Okay? Now, for a jurist and a faqih and a mujtahid, and even the Sahaba at that time, even the laymen, the Sahaba were normal people, that is not the process. That is not exactly the step zero that this process begins with. Okay? The process actually begins by listening to the ayah on its face value and understanding from it its literal meaning, as understood by the Arabs, how they spoke their language and how they would communicate. Okay, that's the first step. Because without that, without understanding that cursory understanding, without having that cursory understanding of what the ayah is about, you can't possibly even imagine beginning this journey into, okay, so what other verses in the Quran correspond to this particular verse? what ahadith are talking about this particular issue, what statements have been said by different Salaf Salihin, so on and so forth, right? So understanding the Arabic of the verse, so understanding its basic cursory meaning is very, very important before you even get there, before you even go there, before you even start analyzing and comparing syntopically different sources for this particular issue, for example. Okay? So that's not where we begin. We begin where the Sahaba naturally began. They would hear a verse and they would understand its meaning literally, and then the Prophet ﷺ, his practice or his words would explain to them the meaning. And that's how a community developed its understanding of the nusus. And that's how they passed it on to the generations which came after them. طيب. So the step one is essentially Fiqhul Lughah. And Fiqhul Lughah is essentially what the Sahaba understood on a first instance when they heard the Quran. Right? The miracle of the Quran was felt by them on the first instance. Before even, they went on comparing the Quran with the Quran and Quran with the Hadith and so on and so forth. Right? So what do we mean by that? What is Fiqhul Lughah? Okay? Fiqhul Lughah, inshallah we'll speak about this in more detail in a separate video, inshallah, which is coming forth, bi'idhni ta'ala. But to briefly mention, Fiqhul Lughah essentially is the combination of all the technical sciences, the history of the Arabic language, its tertiary sciences, things that serve to give the broader perspective on the Arabic language, like its adab, its corpus, its body of literature, and so on and so forth. So its technical sciences, its historical background, its development, and so on and so forth, and then its body of the canon in which the Arabic language is preserved as a language, like the dictionaries and qamus and ma'ajim and so on and so forth. Right, so it's essentially that sweet spot, that harmony that comes as a result of a person achieving mastery in the Arabic language to an extent where all of these sciences come together, right, and they help him understand the verse deeply. Because really, it is this deep understanding that would allow for a greater application later when he does ijtihad, when he tries to deduce a ruling from it and then apply it to the world. If he does not understand the ayah in its Arabic, in its full comprehensiveness, or how comprehensive the ayah is, how widely, how wide-reaching or far-reaching its implications are, then the person, the mujtahid or the faqih, will never be able to apply it onto the society. Even if his ijtihad is 100%, if he does not truly understand the breadth that the Arabic of the language, the ayah, provides him, he will never be able to apply. So the greater the understanding, the deeper the understanding of the ayah in its actual language, right? In all of its, from using all of its sciences like the i'rab of it, nahu of it, the balagha, the sarf, and all the rest of the sciences, inshallah, that we mentioned in more detail in a separate video. And in a nutshell, in this video, inshallah, it's only after all of that the more deeper he understands that, the greater the application becomes of that ayah. So he's able to see with clarity, okay, this ayah or this hukm applies in this place and this place. Oh yes, it applies in this place as well, right? Because he understands it deeply, he understands it more comprehensively. Okay, so not just a cursory glance, but rather a comprehensive understanding of an ayah based on all of its sciences when everything comes together. Right, so how does it look like? So of course it starts with having a deep understanding of the historical development of the Arabic language. So we're expecting from a mujtahid that he's already read into the history of the Arabic literature, how Arabic developed as a language, and he's probably read authors of that period, right? Pre-Islamic and early Islamic period, and then the Umayyad literature and Abbasid literature and so on and so forth. All that literature that helps support the wider meanings that exists in the Arabic language, right? So we assume that he has gone through that first stage, right? Then secondly, we assume that in a step-by-step fashion, although that after a stage everything just becomes one, and a faqih doesn't even have to think about this in a step-by-step fashion. But normally where it starts off with is that you start off with briefly having a glance at the rasm of the Quran, right? How it has been written. Of course, does not lend much to the meaning of the actual ayah, but that's where faqih begins with. He makes sure that he notices how different words have been written differently in the Quran and so on and so forth, because of course that's going to help him later when he utilizes ilm al-qira'at. Okay, ilm al-qira'at, inshallah. طيب. So initially he has a cursory glance at the rasm of it, how the Quran has been written, okay, and different qira'at, what are the differences, okay. So that's the first. Okay, so then after a cursory glance at that, and of course this would happen automatically in a mujtahid's mind because he's a master of this, he begins by analyzing the individual words of the ayah. Before he even starts putting them together, of course this will happen naturally and without any delay or difficulty. This is just like how expert drivers drive a car without even thinking, right? The amount of brain power it actually takes to reverse your car from your garage and pull it out onto the street, right? The amount of skills and awareness and the engagement that the mind really needs, subhanallah, it is quite remarkable that almost every one of us does that automatically, right? So if that example is clear, then we can apply that to a mujtahid's mind. That's how automatically all of this is happening in his mind. But to break it down, he starts analyzing the individual words. So he would look at the wa, and he would look at the in, and the word nakathu, ayman, hum, min, ba'd, ahdihim, wa ta'anu. So he would look at in each of these individual words, and when he's looking at each of these individual words, he's relying on a few sciences. He is relying on the science of the meanings of huruf al-ma'ani. So if there's words in it which are huruf and have meaning, like wa, like in, like mim, and so like fi, right? He would go through that, right? Because that's the structure. That these words are providing him the structure of the ayah. Okay, then he would reason into the nouns which are giving that structural benefit, like the ba'd, for example, right? The dhama'ir, for example. He would look at these nouns as well, which are structural, which are of a structural benefit, which give a structural benefit to the ayah. So all the mufradat basically, and then he goes into the actual verbs and nouns. Like nakathu is a verb, ayman is an ism, ahd is an ism, ta'anu fi'al, verb, deen, ism, right? Faqatilu as again is a verb. So he would go into each of these individual words now, right? And then for analyzing the verbs, he would glance through very quickly, of course, in a blitzing manner, through all the sciences that could lend him support in understanding each of these words deeply. Okay, so he would, for example, when he looks at the word nun, kaf, tha, nakathu, the word wa in nakathu, he would very quickly realize that this is made up of nun, kaf, and tha. These are the root letters of this word, and he would very quickly understand that this word points towards the breaking, right? To break a vow, essentially, or to break a contract, or to break a promise, right? An oath, perhaps, right? But then he would very quickly also realize that the word that similar meaning is also given by words such as naqd, nun, qaf, and dad, okay? Naqdul ahd, right? Naqdul ahd, and so on and so forth. So he would then compare, okay, so this word comes from nun, kaf, tha, and this meaning is shared by some other roots as well. So he would go deeper into the similarities and the differences, and then he would say, okay, so subhanallah, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose this word from this root and not the other root, right? So he would use ilm al-sarf to analyze its structure, its wazn, its scale, its form at the moment. Then he would from that he would extract its root letters, and then from the root letters he would go into ilm al-ishtiqaq, and ilm al-ishtiqaq would in combination with the ilm al-lugha, using the wider corpus in which the Arabic words are preserved, and wider dictionaries basically. He would look at and study how the root letter nun, kaf, and tha has been used in a broad manner in the Arabic language, and then he would sort of come to a meaning which is an overarching meaning in the root letter nun, kaf, and tha. Okay, so once he's understood that, then he would say, okay, you know what, this overarching meaning is also found in some other root letters, right? But where are the differences, right? So then he would go into comparing it with another word, and then he would repeat the same process with other words. He would look at the word naqd, nun, qaf, and dad, and look at, okay, this word is used for X, Y, and Z meanings, and said these meanings are essentially lend to this overarching meaning, and so the overall meanings are very similar, but the finer difference between nun, qaf, and dad and nun, kaf, and tha, right, is this particular point, right? And then he would answer the question for himself, this is why Allah Azza wa Jal chose this particular word in this ayah. How miraculous. So he would come to that conclusion naturally. And then he would likewise analyze the word ayman. Ayman is from yameen. It's an oath, it's a promise that you make, it's a contract. But then the word ahad, which is used over here, is of a similar meaning, and then Allah Azza wa Jal has used them interchangeably, right, over here. If they were in nakathu, and if they break their promise, if they break their covenant, their ayman, covenants, their contracts, their oaths, min ba'di ahdihim, after their contract, after their promise, after this contract was made apparent amongst the communities, if they break their oaths after this covenant was made. So then, subhanAllah, you would say, okay, so ahad and ayman, yameen, they seem very similar. What's the difference, right? So then you would go in, the mujtahid would go and look into the ayn, ha, and da, and then the yameen, ya, mim, and nun, right, from the yumna, from the word from yameen, from the right hand, right? And yameen is perhaps called so because it's when two right hands shake, right, to seal the deal, right, and so on and so forth. So what's the difference, and why would Allah choose say aymanahum first and then say ahdihim? He could have said wa in naqadu ahdahum min ba'di aymanihim. He could have done it. He could have said it this way, right? He could have used ahd over here and ayman over here, right? But Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't do that, right? For what particular reason? So that he would do the same procedure as he did with nakathu, okay? And then he would look at the word ta'anu. Why would Allah Azza wa Jal choose ta'an? There's other words that are used for verbal pain, when you inflict verbal abuse to someone, right? There's other words in the Arabic language, right? Why would Allah Azza wa Jal choose ta'anu, right? So he would essentially go through all of that. So he would utilize the ilm al-sarf, ilm al-ishtiqaq, ilm al-wad', ilm al-lugha, and lugha, all of that, right? Subhanallah. And of course, in that he would be analyzing lines of poetry where the words are used. So he's going to be relying on some sciences of poetry, which would make him see the usage of the words in a bit more clarity, with a bit more clarity, and so on and so forth. Okay, so he would do that for all these words, and then so he would place them in their right context, and he would understand that these are the reasons why this particular word has been used in this particular place and not another word has been used in its place, and why certain words are used interchangeably in this particular order and not the other way around. Okay, and so on and so forth. That's essentially that's all happening almost automatically. And of course, after a certain period, a mujtahid becomes an expert in these meanings, and he doesn't have to do this again and again for every single word. But initially, of course, when he's still in his prime years, he has to do all of this work. And even the ulama who are seasoned fuqaha and mujtahidun, they still go through the same process, more or less, depending on their grasp with, and of course, the Lughah, and of course their memory, how much they remember from their first readings, and so on and so forth. These are human factors. So then he moves on to the sciences where of the sentence, right? Where now he can analyze. Okay, so wa meant that, in meant this, mim over here meant that. He has done all of that work now. Now he wants to put them together. Why would Allah Azza wa Jal say, for example, mim ba'di? He could have just said wa innakat wa imanahum ba'da adihim. He could have just said ba'da. Why? What's the point of using min before ba'di, right? And again, you would look at, for example, the way that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed this. He said wa innaka, and if they, right, and if they do this, break the covenant or the vow, and so on and so forth. He could have just said wa idha nakathu, and when they do that, instead of saying if. So what's the difference between using an if statement and then doing an idha statement, a when statement, right? So they would analyze these things. Okay, and then of course they would be analyzing the structure and the placement of words. Wa in nakathu aymanahum. He could have said wa in aymanahum nakathu min ba'di ahdihim, right? He could have changed the placing of the word. So the Shaykh, the Mujtahid, the Faqih, he is analyzing all of these minute details to understand its implications, right? Right? How severe the meanings are of this particular verse. Right. So, just for a particular word, how much effort that he's put in, subhanAllah, you can already observe this, and the kind of pain that he's going through. And then this is just round one, and the round two is all about the sentence and the order of words and how their relation is with each other, right? And then the third stage, the third round would be the meanings implied by these structural changes. Okay. So he's understood the important he's understood the individual words. Now, then he's put them together in a sentence, and he's analyzed the i'rab, and he's analyzed their structure and relation together. And then in round three, he's going through the meanings and implications of the meanings produced by these structures, right? All of this is Fiqhul Lughah. Okay, all of this is Fiqhul Lughah, subhanAllah. So he's put every single thing together to get to a very, very deep conclusion about the wider context, the entire context of the application of the ayah in terms of its Lughah. Still, we haven't got to the second stage where we're going to now start engaging the ulum of the Quran and Hadith and Fiqh and all. We haven't got to that stage yet. This is still the stage where a native Arab Sahabi, he would listen to an ayah, and this is what he would understand, right? So you can already see the virtue that a Sahabi has over us in his understanding and his fahm of the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla. A normal person like us, a mujtahid, the most qualified faqih would have to go through all of this trouble, but an Arab, a native Arab of that time, subhanAllah, he would understand all of this beauty and the i'jaz and the miracle of the Quran in that first instance, and the severity of the application of such of this verse, for example. So just to give you guys a context, this verse is one single verse in Surah Tawbah, and this is the foundation of our belief as Muslims that anyone who insults the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla in any of its forms, especially if he insults the messengers, and especially so if he insults the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is the hukm? What is ruling for it, right? And if you just want to get a very quick understanding of it, then we have the ijma'. Every single madhab, sahabi, every single person in our entire history have held, without a difference of opinion, that a person who curses, insults the Prophet ﷺ or his family, right, or any part of the deen, any symbol of the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, then they leave the fold of Islam, and they are supposed to be given a capital punishment by the state or by those who are in charge of the legal governance of the Muslim or the affairs of the Muslims. Subhanallah. So that's the ijma'. So you don't have to go too deep into this if you really just want to get to the ruling of it from an ijma'i perspective, from the consensus of the Muslim earliest Muslim community. But Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah he writes a over 500 page book on just this ayah. He makes this particular ayah the foundation of his istidlal, and he reasons from after mentioning the ijma' of the Sahaba in like 1.5 page and the ruling of this issue. He spends another 500 odd pages explaining why we hold this opinion, why this ijma' came into place in the first place. So when you go through that, you're actually seeing the work of a mujtahid in action. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, you see all of this, that all the steps that I'm mentioning, he goes through all of this, right? But in his own way. So you don't get to see the minute details of his reasoning, but if you really dig deep into it, you see that, okay, you know what, Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah is talking about this in a particular way because he is considering the i'rab of this ayah. Okay, he's considering that, okay, perhaps this i'rab could lend to a different meaning, right? And then he goes on to deconstruct that i'rab and say that no, this i'rab will lead to a meaning which is completely invalid in the Arabic language, and the Sahaba would have never understood it in this way, and so on and so forth, right? And then he would bring out other, you would see him bring other Quran, ayat from the Quran, and so on and so forth, to lend support to the i'rab and so on and so forth. So subhanAllah, you see that in action in his book. So this is still the first stage, Fiqhul Lughah, and you can already understand how deep this is, okay? Now, we've only really scratched the surface, really. We haven't gone too far into the process yet. The step 2, or the stage 2 of this reasoning in a mujtahid's mind, because we're still in its early stages, this journey has just begun, subhanAllah. Now, that point that we mentioned earlier, that we analyzed, okay, so we've understood the meaning of this verse in its lughah. Now, let's contextualize this according to the Sharia, right? Because the lughah, yes, could have many particular meanings, but the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal and the fahm of the Sahaba and the Salaf from the Prophet, it contextualizes things. It limits its scope in certain aspects. Okay, for example, the word salah, it means dua, but when we say salah now, we mean the prayer, the ritual prayer that we do five times a day, or more so if we do nawafil and so on and so forth. طيب. So the step 2 would then be to engage with the wider body of the nusus now. So this step 2 is all about the ulum that will take you to step 3, which is actually making the deduction, deriving the ruling. Okay, so now you start looking at, okay, what other verses are there in the Quran that lend support to this meaning? Okay, and then of course to understand those verses, you'll have to go through the same process, right? Subhanallah, that deep process of, okay, you know what, this ayah actually does apply to this verse. If you can't do the same process on a different ayah, you won't be able to apply the context of that ayah onto this. You won't be able to relate, right? You can only relate between two ayahs when you totally and completely understand them, right, based on the initial Arabic meaning, right? So the Quran talks about this particular meaning in another place, mashallah, well done, right? And so on and so forth. طيب. Then you have to repeat the same process with a hadith. How would you know that this hadith is talking about this issue? Again, the same first level Fiqhul Lughah understanding of the hadith. Okay, so you go through that, right? Then you look at the statements of the Salaf about this issue, right? So their fatawa, so you understand their fatawa based on how they described it, so on and so forth. Okay, and things that have not been contextualized have not been limited by the Quran or the Hadith or the fahm of the Salaf, then you bring in the Arabic language and then you decide its boundaries. Okay, you know what, this thing has not been limited, so the scope of this is wider, but this meaning has been limited, so this would not be as wide an application as the other. So for all of this, you have to engage with ulum al-Quran, right? Because you're engaging with other ayat, so you have to make sure that you understand that, oh, this ayah is not abrogated, it's still in action, it is still being used, it's still applicable. You're using, okay, where was this ayah revealed? Was it revealed in Mecca or Medina? And the difference that makes to the context and the implication, that you would be engaging all the rest of the ulum of the Quran, okay, especially ilm al-qira'at. For example, let's quickly go through the meaning of this and I'll explain this point. So Allah says in the Quran, in this particular ayah, He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وإن نكثوا أيمانهم من بعد عهدهم وطعنوا في دينكم فقاتلوا أئمة الكفر إنهم لا أيمان لهم لعلهم ينتهون. وإن نكثوا أيمانهم, and if they break their covenant, من بعد عهدهم, after their promise, after this contract was made, وَطَعَنُوا فِي دِينِكُمْ, and they insult your religion, right? فَقَاتِلُوا أَئِمَّةَ الْكُفْرِ, fight the leaders of kufr. إِنَّهُمْ لَا أَيْمَانَ لَهُمْ, indeed there's no covenant for them after this, once they've insulted. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَنْتَهُونَ, perhaps they may come to an end with this. Now, in one of the qira'at, it says لا إيمان لهم, لا إيمان لهم, instead of saying أيمان, right? So this brings into play the rasm of the Quran. So one has a fatha, the other would have a kasra. لا إيمان لهم, okay? And the hamza would be at the bottom as opposed to on the top. So لا إيمان لهم as opposed to لا أيمان لهم, okay? And then iman would be with a madda, and a is with a, it's a ya over here is a harful leen, so it would not be elongated, but then iman is elongated. So ilm al-tajweed comes into play, and ilm al-rasm, ilm al-qira'at. Now, of course, the word has changed. Iman is iman, faith, and iman is a plural of yameen, a covenant, right? What difference does that make in meaning, right? So ulum al-Quran would give you that, right? So then you would go and look at, subhanallah, what this implies at the end, and Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentions this, that someone who insults the Prophet ﷺ, if he is from the Muslims and then he became a disbeliever because of this, or he was from one of the dhimmis who was under the protection of this Muslim state, and then he did this action, he cursed the Prophet ﷺ or cursed the deen of Allah in any shape or form, la imana lahum, their faith will not be accepted from them, i.e. they will definitely be given the punishment in this life. Even if their tawbah is accepted by Allah that is for the akhirah now, they will still be punished in this life. Their iman will not be accepted from them. Okay, so subhanallah, this is engaging with the ulum al-Quran, right? Then of course when you engage with the hadith, you have to engage with, and the statement of the salaf, you have to engage with the ulum al-hadith, right? You have to engage with, okay, what sciences you have to rely on to make sure the hadith that you're using for this particular purpose is authentic, and the statements of the salaf are authentic, right? So authenticity based on the narrations, that's ulum al-hadith. Okay, so you're engaging with that, and then you would be engaging with ulumul fiqh, right? Ulumul fiqh would imply sciences of, and before ulumul fiqh, of course, you are engaging primarily over here with usul al-fiqh. Okay, usul al-fiqh, and usul al-fiqh are the usul that allow us to reason like a Muslim, right? Most of the reasoning comes from what the first stage analysis, the Fiqhul Lughah analysis of the ayah, and that forms the basis of, okay, this hukm, the hukm of this is mujmal or mubayyan. So these are terminologies I'm speaking. So you come to a conclusion based on the Fiqhul Lughah analysis, right? So ulumul ijtihad primarily rely on usul al-fiqh. Okay, usul fiqh is the main science in all of this, and ulum al-Quran, ulum al-hadith lend support to usul al-fiqh in helping you derive the ruling. So an expert jurist, a fiqhi, is doing all of that. Okay, he is doing all of that, right? And usul al-fiqh is essentially after, hand in hand with fiqh al-lugha. Usul al-fiqh allows him to, after relying on certain principles that of course he understands and can derive from the nusus directly, those principles he then uses to extract rulings from it. So he would go, okay, if they break their covenant and then they insult insult your deen, insult your religion, any portion of it, any part of it, so insulting the religion is actually a form of breaking the covenant. So why would Allah Azza wa Jal mention this as a separate thing when this was already included in نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُم. You could have just said وَإِن نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُم مِّن بَعْدِ عَهْدِهِمْ فَقَاتِلُوا. Right? That was not done by Allah Azza wa Jal. He made a separate clause here, and he took out a particular member of that class. Everything that breaks a covenant, a particular member of that is when you insult the deen. Something specific that also breaks, or one of the things that breaks the covenant between two nations, Muslims and Kuffar, is insulting the religion of Islam. Okay, but Allah Azza wa Jal mentions it separately to make sure that Muslims understand that not every breaking of every nullification of a covenant leads to this conclusion, which is فَقَاتِلُوا, fight. And this does not lend the title of the leaders of kufr, imams of kufr, to those who break a covenant, normally speaking, because that covenant can be renewed. The two nations could come to another truce, another peace treaty, and they could come to a conclusion where they want to extend that period of mutual peace amongst themselves. Okay, of course, for the Muslims it is not permissible to live in a perpetual state of peace with the non-Muslims. There has to be jihad, there has to be da'wah, there has to be a time where the kuffar are engaged with da'wah and the Islam is given to them, right? Either by da'wah, and if they refuse and they fight and they come into the battlefield, then you do jihad and you spread the message of Islam. Okay, so regardless of that, if people break the covenant can be renewed. Not always. It's only in this particular case when some other nation or party, it insults the deen of Allah, or even if it's one person, right, that insults the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, right, they have now become the leaders of kufr. A'immatul kufr. There's no one filthier than them in this world, no one more disgusting and disdained in this world than them. They are the a'immatul kufr, and the only solution for them is, or the hukm for them is qatilu, fight them. Okay, so fight them. Subhanallah. So he makes this atful makhsus, atful khasi ala al-am. This is khas. Ta'anu fi dinikum, insulting the religion, is specific, and breaking of a covenant in many of its different forms, right, is general. But Allah Azza wa Jalla makes this a special mention to make sure that the ruling, it relies on this special mention and not just this. Okay, because not all breaking of covenants and treaties leads to this conclusion of fighting the A'immatul Kufr and labeling them as the leaders of Kufr. Okay, so then the next portion is, when you are looking at this portion where it says فَقَاتِلُ, fight the A'immatul Kufr, where do we get from this that they must be killed? If it's a one person, if he's insulted the Prophet, they must be given the capital punishment by the state. How do we get to that conclusion? Right? The conclusion is that Allah is saying to you as a community, fight them. Right? And naturally speaking, if a community is going to fight one person, they're going to kill him. So the natural conclusion of this is that when you as a community is going to fight a nation, they're definitely going to lose. However, if it's one person, that person, the qital with him is to kill him. Okay? So this is a wider implication of these words. فَقَاتِلُوا أَئِمَّةُ الْكُفْرِ. So you're now going deeper into this. So you fight them. If it's one person, what kind of implication does that have? If it's a group, what kind of implication does that have? How does that change the ruling? Right? Subhanallah. And then not accepting their faith, even if they repent and they say we have now become Muslims again, their iman will not be accepted. Their no more covenants from them will be accepted. The only solution now is jihad for them, no peace treaties anymore, and Allah Azza wa Jal has promised, this is the only place, right, when Muslims go to fight, where Allah Azza wa Jal has given them clear-cut guarantee that they will definitely win when they fight against someone who has insulted the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, because this is only through this jihad, this qital, that they will come to an end. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَنْتَهُونَ. And Allah Azza wa Jal uses يَنْتَهُونَ. He does not use any other word, right? And then what implication does that have, right, in the application of this onto the current times, perhaps, if we want to analyze it in that way, right? So, and then you go on to look at the wider ulum of fiqh. After you've analyzed this ayah from its usuli perspective, then you want to engage with the rest of the ulum of al-fiqh, which would say, okay, you know what is the wisdom behind this ruling? So maqasid al-sharia, why does the sharia has this rule in place? What are the wisdoms behind this ruling in the sharia, for example, right? And what qawa'id al-fiqh are being implicated from this? What are the general overarching principles of fiqh that are being extracted from this? Okay, so and so and so forth. So you do all that analysis, right? And you have that strong grounding in fiqh al-lughah of the ayah, and you've done the ijtihad, you've utilized all the ulum of ijtihad, the tools of ijtihad. The last step before you move on to actually making the ruling, doing the ijtihad, you have to make sure that you compare this understanding, the meaning that you're getting from this, from all of this analysis of yours, you compare it with similar topics in the sharia. So breaking of a covenant is related to doing a peace treaty. And then that is related to the concept of, okay, who is the peace treaty done with? And then peace treaty then lends to the topic of, okay, is always a peace treaty between Muslims and non-Muslims, or is there another situation? So then you come to the position where you have dhimmis under the protection of this Muslim state, living as citizens of the state, but as dhimmis. Okay, so you analyze one particular ruling in relation to all the other rulings of a similar nature in the Sharia. Okay, so and all the rest of the body of rulings similar in nature to this one. Then and only then, subhanallah, you come to stage 3 or step 3, which is deriving the ruling, saying the fatwa, or giving the ruling. Okay, in fact, you've actually not arrived to the fatwa yet. The fatwa is step 4. This is ijtihad. You've just arrived at the ruling of a particular issue. If someone insults the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, then the ruling is that they should be given the capital punishment. If it's a nation, that they will be fought, there will be no covenant given to them, their iman will not be accepted from them, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's a ruling. How does that apply to us now? Right? For that application, for that fatwa to actually come into place, the shaykh, this mujtahid, this faqih actually has to have a very broad and deep understanding of the modern political situation, legal bodies, economic frameworks, the historical context of the people, their culture, how they think, in what economic condition they are, and so on and so forth. An easy example for this for us to understand this would be from the caliphate of Umar radiallahu anh, where in the great famine that happened in his caliphate during his era, there was a great famine that affected the people of Arabia, and there was so many thefts based because of hunger and poverty that Umar suspended the general punishment of cutting the hands of a thief. And they were very specific, and they would do extensive inquiries into to make sure that no one was unjustly punished for theft, because people were forced to steal because of extreme hunger and famine. Okay, it was an extreme situation. So Umar radiallahu anh, he sort of suspended the wider application of this punishment in Islam, which is the cutting of the hands of a thief after he's stolen to a certain degree, right? So that is the application, because Umar radiallahu anh, being the Khalifa, he understood the political situation, the economic situation of the people, right? And subhanAllah, the legal structure, he understood that there were not enough mechanisms and enough people to be able to implement the wider legal procedures to make sure that no one was unjustly punished, right? If it was a simple case of, did you steal? Yes, I stole. How much did you steal? I stole this much. This is beyond the limit, so therefore your hands must be cut, and therefore this is the punishment. This is a very, very rudimentary and a surface level application of the Sharia, right? A mujtahid understands the context of the people. He makes sure that the application of the Sharia is not done unjustly, right? It's not done unjustly. So all of that, subhanallah, it is after all of that a fatwa is given, right? A conclusion based on our current times is reached by a mujtahid. And if anyone thinks that is easy, And if anyone thinks that earning the title of a mufti and being called a mufti is a joke, then they should really think about themselves, and they have a lot of introspection to do for themselves. They really have to think a lot about themselves and their intentions behind this and what they are really seeking. Because a lot of people use these titles nowadays to, subhanallah, fool the people. They fool the people, and they take center stage with these titles, being called leaders, muftis, subhanallah. And this is something that is completely and utterly blameworthy in our religion. And after all of this, subhanallah, every single student who has listened, who's come this far, they must be able to appreciate how deep and how complicated and how profound this business of ijtihad is, right? And how important the Arabic language is in this process. Subhanallah.